Hello and welcome, listeners, to a special episode of Campaign Chemistry. I'm going to introduce, we have a full house today, so I'm just going to introduce everyone who is on the line. Firstly, we want to thank Hannah Campbell, founder and managing director of 112 Agency, an influencer agency based in the UK, for joining us. Hannah, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, we love that you're here, and our listeners will understand why. And then, of course, based on the topic, some of you may have seen a report that Campaign published last week on creator pay, and I have the incredibly talented reporters behind that, Cecilia Garzella and Julia Walker. How are you ladies doing today?
Amazing. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm excited to talk about this in more depth.
Yes. And you each played a really significant role in this report. I'll give a little background to our listeners. You know, Julia is our creator economy and social media policy and tech reporter. Cecilia is our data journalist. And Hannah Campbell, contributed to our piece, giving her perspective as the owner of a business impacted by the creator pay issue in the industry. So I will kick off. Hannah, can you share with our listeners what you shared with me and Can about the holes in the creator pay system and how it's impacted your business? I love our story and how we met, and you
Mhm.
played such a crucial part in this. So, can you share with listeners what you shared with me at Can?
Yes, of course. So the biggest issue we tend to have with creator pay is just how long it takes for creators to be paid. So we're often dealing with net 30, net 60, net 90, and now net 120-day payment terms. What that means is that, creators have created content or they may have signed a contract. It may then take a month or two for the campaign to go live. They're then having to wait 30, 60, 90, 120 days afterwards. But obviously, whilst they're creating that content, it stops them from doing other things to make money. And we've had creators who then can't make rent. They can't pay for nursery fees for their children. It really affects them. We've had to battle with massive brands who have big legal teams and, a fortress of financial teams, trying to get through to the right person, but obviously also trying to maintain the relationship, with the brands, because we want to stay on the good side of them and we want to keep on working with them. So yeah, it's very much a minefield that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in terms of pay.
Yeah. And to clarify for our listeners, when we talk about net 30, net 60, net 90, that's, for example, 30 days of payment may be expected after the content is handed in, or is it from the day of the shoot?
It's actually when the content goes live.
So
So
someone could record do a post, and then not until it goes live, that's when the net 30 kicks in.
exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
And sometimes it's even later than that. So sometimes it's once the brand have seen the results of the campaign, at that point, they then say, you can invoice. And at that point, that's when the countdown starts.
Right. And that's where that ripple effect that you just alluded to, that's where that kind of kicks in, where it affects
Yeah.
creators' livelihoods.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah, for that background. So now I'm going to kick it over to Cecilia and Julia. Ladies, can you give us the TLDR on this report that was published last week?
Yeah, I mean, to echo a lot of what Hannah just said, we found that, the $250 billion creator economy still runs on these outdated, often unfair payment systems. Creators are expected to deliver these really fast turnarounds on content, but the money can take months, even up to a year, I've heard, to arrive. And kind of industry studies have shown that, as many as 87% of creators have faced some kind of late or problematic payments. Like Hannah said, sometimes leaving them unable to cover just basic rent. I think what really surprised me about all this is just how widespread the impact is. Like, it's not just creators. There's really like a whole creator industrial complex, so to speak, and like a growing ecosystem of talent managers, like influencer agencies, platform services that are all kind of caught up in these issues.
Mhm. Thank you, Cecilia, for breaking that down. Julia, any surprise learnings that came your way? You have a unique relationship directly with these creators because you're covering their personal stories and just their role in the ecosystem. What kind of took you by surprise?
Well, I think first to go off of what Cecilia just said, with the numbers fresh in our head, it's really important to talk about how big this industry has become and how there's not really much legislation sort of enacted yet to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly. And I think what we found in our talks with people, both on background and on record, is that a lot of our sources felt that brands were taking advantage of that lack of legislation and also the types of creators they were working with. A lot of creators are younger, maybe don't have backgrounds in finance or self advocacy in business settings, and if you're a big brand, or let's say you're a small creator, let's say you're a creator and you're starting and you're sitting at a table with all of these big execs trying to negotiate how much your product is worth. And this might be your first job. You might not have been able to go to school, or maybe you chose a different route. And all of a sudden, you're taking the role of a financial negotiator with no training. How do you navigate that? And how do you make sure that you're being treated fairly in the system with no legislation to back that for you if you're unable to advocate for yourself? So I think that goes off of what Cecilia was saying with the numbers. It's a huge industry. So why is this such a big problem? Also, I think in itself, it's really surprising when Luz and I had the idea for this creator pay report, when Luz brought it to us, a lot of it was based on background conversations we were having with agencies, where we would ask, what are some holes that you're having in your coverage that you're seeing on the editorial side? What are things that magazines and publications aren't reporting about in the creator economy? And the reason I say those conversations were on background was because even just 1 year ago today, the agencies wouldn't speak on the record about these payment agreements. We would ask for people to come to panels and discuss it, both creator side and agency side. What issues are you dealing with in terms of creator pay? People wouldn't want to speak on it. So I think in itself, it was very surprising to me throughout this reporting process how many people just a year later were willing to come forward on the record and speak to experiences they've had. A lot of people on agency side have said that they're going and calling out brands on LinkedIn now and, being LinkedIn warriors. So it's kind of crazy to me how much that has changed in a year, and very exciting to see how this whole economy might change in the coming year. And going off of that, there's been union-inspired content creator organizations that are increasingly present in this space. The Creators Guild of America launched in 2023 just to make sure, just to open up the conversation of creators getting paid fairly and on time. And SAG-AFTRA, which was originally, as we've seen in the headlines the past few years, it's a union for actors and media professionals, approved a national influencer and digital creator committee in April. So I think we're going to see this conversation really rising.
I love that. And you know what, Julia? You just reminded me. I forgot we weren't getting people on the record. Like, we've been trying to do this for almost a year now since our new team started in November. And it was because of those conversations that you mentioned where it was like, yeah, no one's talking about it, but this is actually a bigger problem than we all think. So, Hannah, I'd love to kind of put a face to the story, not necessarily your face, but, like you represent a lot of folks that have been impacted by this. So are there any, like stories or just examples that you can share with us on the exact ripple effect of these delayed payment terms?
Yeah. I mean, it starts from brands to us, firstly. We're 4 years in now, right? So when brands don't pay us, it's terrible for us, before it even gets to the creator, because it means that in terms of cash flow, in terms of forecasting, when we expect payments to come in, we've got a team having to pay them their salaries, having to pay our overheads, the software we use, we struggle ourselves, right, with the brands paying so late. And then the ripple effect to our creators is that, for some of them, some people haven't had money to go on holiday. So they've booked their holiday, they've expected the money to come in, they're spending money, and they haven't had it. And there's been times where I've had to there's one creator I had to give, them a couple of £1,000 for their spending money that they expected to come in from the brand. And for them to ask me, they must be in a terrible place because they don't want to come and have to ask that question, right? There's been times where people haven't been able to make rent, or they haven't been able to pay for childcare costs or bills that are coming out. I've had a creator say that they've got, we call them bailiffs in the UK. I'm not sure what you would call them, but debt collectors who, they can't because they can't pay their bills, right? And they're expected payments to come in and it's not coming in. So it affects so many people, not just, it affects the creator the worst, but it also affects the growth of this layer of smaller agencies who kind of sit in the middle of both. And it's very kind of anti-growth, right? Because how can we grow if we can't get, the money in time? And yes, the bigger agencies, where these payment terms were first agreed for, because obviously they're bigger, they can afford to not be paid to 90 days. They're fine. They're laughing. That's absolutely fine. But the smaller people who are actually setting up to kind of counteract bigger issues, we can't grow. It's a lot harder for us. And when I say we've set up to counteract bigger issues, it's things like the reason why we set up 112 Agency is to ensure there's inclusion and that influencer marketing was representative of, a diverse range of people. Our mission is important, but if we can't get paid on time, then it's a lot harder for us to exist and to stay around. So there's a big effect on basically, I think Julia mentioned it, but everybody in the creator economy is affected by this.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to know you're not the only influencer agency who's spoken about this, how it kind of holds back business growth. And then that obviously, we didn't have to go through like the ripple effect on the economy on that. But, it is all super connected. Thank you so much. It's just crazy to me. This is such a big like economy, creator economy. It's such a big business and there's such a huge issue in it. But we want to play devil's advocate in our reporting too, and Cecilia, I would love to, ask you about this. So it was really important to you as our data journalist to make sure this issue was reported on in a fair and balanced way. So let's talk a little bit about the other side of this equation. What did you learn about the payment structure on the agency's end? You also spoke to lawyers, you spoke to the kind of the other side, quote unquote, if we will. But let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of, finger pointing and blame game in this space, right? But I think what stood out to me was, there's not just one party to blame, right? Like agencies are often kind of, in a way, financing campaigns themselves if they're fronting costs while waiting on brands to release funds. So when brands delay, agencies and talent managers like get stuck juggling that cash flow. Like some, like Hannah, even dip into their own pockets to pay creators on time, which just isn't sustainable. But at the same time, we also did hear from folks that a lot of times, a lot of the large agencies sometimes can even hold payments or like use creators' fees to cover their overhead before passing money along. That really drove home for me that, creators and, like Hannah said, a lot of these smaller agencies and talent managers, they bear the brunt of it, but the root problem is very structural and ripples through the whole, ecosystem.
Yeah. And so it's a little bit about, it's kind of the on us is on the brands and agencies a little bit just to kind of, maybe reevaluate the way payments go. And I know you guys provided some solutions in there that I would love to get to. Julia, my question for you, we mentioned before you have a relationship with these creators, but it was really interesting, as we talked through some of the follow-ups that have come out since the report has been published. What are some of the other challenges that come with being a creator in today's day and age? You have some really great points that it's not just about payment. There's so much other things that they're putting on the line when they decide to take the plunge and become a creator. Can you go over that a little?
Yeah, well, I think what really struck me about what Hannah said so far is that this is an anti growth industry. I think that you said. I think that sort of ripples on so many different levels, including anti growth for the creators. It's like so much of their content that they make, so much of their success is so personal and subjective to just in general. And I think that how are you going to be successful as a creator and prop yourself up for that success if people don't feel the need to pay you for the work that you've worked so hard for? What does that do for your work confidence? What does that do for your self perception of your ability to succeed in this field, which is already very competitive? And that magnifies for creators of different backgrounds, of course. Hina Sabentine wasn't mentioned in the report, but it's a creator who I've been talking with for a few of my pieces for a campaign, and I interviewed them about Pride Month campaigns and Pride Month partnerships and work. So much of Hina's content is tied to being a non-binary lesbian creator. This year, 2025 was the slowest Pride Month that Hina has ever had since beginning as a creator. So when brands, whether it's because of political climate, current conversations, cultural trends, if brands don't want to work with you for content that's tied to your identity, what does that say about being accepted into the space that you want to succeed in for your career? And what does that do to your confidence? I also think another thing that Luce and I were just talking about yesterday that came to mind after we wrote the report is a lot of times creators, we don't want to use the word blacklisted, but once you put yourself out into the creator space and create that digital footprint for yourself, even if it's totally appropriate, it's harder to be accepted back into the corporate world. Just one example, someone we haven't interviewed, but someone I've observed is a style creator, Acquired Style. She began her content creating career by filming videos of the outfit she wants to wear to work that day. And she had a corporate job and she would just film in her apartment the outfit she was planning on wearing to work. Obviously, nothing inappropriate with that. They're all outfits for corporate, all very, all of her content was very appropriate. And she got fired from her corporate job. So it's very interesting to see if a creator puts themselves out there. We've talked to a lot of creators who were laid off from corporate or they decided to leave on their own. But if they do make that leap of faith, whatever the circumstance, to join into the creator economy, and they fail because of the barriers that we're discussing in this episode, what are their chances of rejoining back? Have we even got there yet? Have we had enough creators go that route and try to retreat back into corporate if this doesn't work out for them? I think that could be a new thing that campaign studies in the future. But those are some barriers that I've observed.
Yeah, I think we're all under the assumption that like once you become a creator, like then it's all, happy go lucky and you're in it and that's your life career. But, these people are kind of really taking a leap of faith. And if it doesn't work out, to what you said, Julia, it can be scary and, what the hell happens next kind of a thing. And I think a little bit of background on that influencer, you had mentioned they worked for a financial brand too. But they weren't taking the pictures like in the office or anything. So technically, that's the first thing that came to mind when you were telling me that story. I'm like, oh, what were they doing in the office? Like, but no, they were doing it in their own free time. So it really depends on like the employer.
We talked to one creator, the opening creator in our report, who was fired from his job um, on technicalities, but he strongly believes that it was because of the content he created, which was parodies of the corporate world. So,
Yeah.
there's so many stories of that, and obviously creators express their own takes. It wasn't just fashion videos that she was making, but it's interesting to see, how these people are fired from their corporate and how it's interesting to sort of begin to watch it play out if people want to rejoin after.
Yeah, for sure. That was Varun, right? That was the creator, Varun. Thank you, Julia, for giving perspective there. Hannah, you are in the business here. Where do you see the creator space a year from now in terms of like payment structure? Like I'd love to kind of talk about the messaging that we've all received and the reaction, which it's been kind of insane. Hannah, I'd love to hear from you.
I'm going to be optimistic because why not?
Yes.
And from what I have seen, which is a change since we first spoke about the report, is I am seeing more upfront payments from brands. I am seeing more understanding of us saying these are our terms and you have to pay to 30 days or this can't work. So I do think there is a shift happening. I think there is an awareness. And I think because we're speaking to people like marketers who actually get it, because the thing is that it's not just on the marketers, it's not necessarily their fault. You've got procurement processes, you've got finance, this is the way we've always done things. But we've had times where marketing, professionals have pushed payments through for us, to help. And so I think if we can get more internal advocates in the big agencies and in the big brands to say, actually, for influencers, these are people just like you and I. I can't afford to not have my salary paid, at the day that I expect it. And these creators should be getting paid too. There is a little bit of a shift. So I'm optimistic that we will move closer to the payments being on time and being within fair timeframes. However, how much, what percentage of people will move to that? I don't know. I think this is still going to be a big issue in a year's time. But yeah, I am optimistic that we are making strides in the right direction.
I love it. We'll take you on your optimism because we want that's why we're doing this report, right? We want to see
Yeah,
change.
exactly.
Cecilia, what about you? What do you think will kind of stem from this or a year from now? You provided some solutions in there too in the report.
Yeah, I will say even when I'm on social now and going through my feeds, I do look at things a bit more cynically after all this because it prior to it, it's easy to just see these creators and their fun brand deals, but now I realize, all the people behind the scenes and all that. But all that to say, I'm optimistic too, Hannah. I think we'll see more progress towards transparency and standardization in creator pay.
Mm.
Like Julia mentioned earlier, there are kind of unions and collectives that are sprouting to kind of push for fairer practices. And a lot of just like industry advocates, like people like Hannah, the creator economy isn't going away anytime soon. But whether I think it becomes sustainable will depend on like if the payment side catches up. I mean, the UK government actually recently proposed capping supplier payment terms at 60 days, which is crazy. I think eventually reducing to 45 days later on. We don't have something like that in the US yet, hopefully. But right now, I think it still feels a bit like the Wild West out here. But I hope over the next year, kind of, we'll start to see real guardrails put in place.
Yeah, I would love to see the American ad industry kind of take some notes from the UK's playbook. Like, there's just so much more legislation that protects consumers over there. I feel, no shade at, any marketers that we've spoken to, but even like, pharma, I believe pharma advertising isn't permitted there. I saw a story on one of our campaign sites this morning that there was, an ad created by Billion Dollar Boy, and it was deemed as promoting alcoholism over, the fun nature of the spot that was originally intended. So, there's things like that in place over there that I think we could probably use here. Cecilia, for those listening and who want to be an ally in this, what are some of the solutions that you did propose in there?
Yeah, a lot of our sources, provided some really good, I would say, like even long-term structural solutions. I'll give a shout out to Nat of the Good Egg Agency in the UK. She kind of proposed things like regular audits of agency fees because, on both sides of the pond, agency fees are often not transparent. And more rigorous procurement vetting, and then even partial or full upfront payments if possible. One thing she said I thought was super interesting is securing creators' funds in some kind of like independent, trusted like escrow or something. So I don't think as of now, that's really widely practiced, but I think it should. And for creators, some of the lawyers we talked to advocated or suggested kind of putting watermarks on your content until final payment is made.
We published an op-ed this morning because obviously, we don't want to let this conversation die down, but it was from the CEO of Digital Voices, Jenny Quigley Jones. And, it's funny that you mentioned the escrow word, Cecilia, because that's also something she proposed here and what the role that brands can pay. So hopefully we'll see kind of just more options being considered here. Hannah, I'd love to kind of wrap with you and just hear, and Cecilia too. We've all been getting kind of feedback. And Hannah, you had a big post, and I saw you were getting a lot of love. What are you hearing on your end after the report came out?
So a lot of people are thankful. So thank you for bringing this to light. A lot of people are saying like we can talk about it now. It feels like if if we're speaking about it as people who work in the industry who have, lots to lose, we could lose clients and stuff like this, we could lose opportunities. But if we're bold enough to speak about it, it's given people the power to speak about it too. We're now having conversations with people about actually how can we collectively come together and make a change? How can we use our voices collectively, to actually hold brands to account and hold big agencies to account around payments? So it's all been very positive, and it's all kind of like, okay, it's great, it's out there now. We've exposed the issue, which is important. Now, what steps do we take to actually ensure that we put things in place to protect creators and to protect small talent managers and small agencies?
Yeah, for sure. And then, yeah, I second that because I feel like I don't know if it's my feed or my algorithm, but I feel like I've been seeing more and more posts from people just
Yeah.
straight up calling out, like I don't know so
Yeah.
much brands, but they
Yeah.
are calling out some of the bad players that I've seen. Have you guys seen that?
I've seen so many of my peers calling out big agencies and brands, like naming them on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I feel like I'm still a bit too nervous to do that.
Yeah, you still have a business to run.
Yeah, exactly. But I love it. I love to see it. I love the boldness. We are currently in battles with one of the big agencies who one of my, industry friends just called out on LinkedIn last week. And, my colleagues were like, shall we call them out too? And I'm like, I'm not sure, because we're getting a lot of opportunities from them currently. But the fact that people are becoming more bold, and actually, even my colleagues and people who work, more junior people in teams are becoming aware of this and actually being like, what can we do to solve this, right? So it's not just an issue that's sitting with, the CEOs and MDs of agencies now, or the finance teams of agencies. Actually, everybody's getting involved and being like, what can we do? Which is, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Cecilia, what about you? What have you been seeing?
Yeah, no, Hannah summed it up perfectly. I think the only thing I would add is I think the more we keep talking about it and just not letting the conversation die, it kind of destigmatizes the whole issue, and maybe more people will, be confident to speak out, or even provide more data and more transparency. And so I think we just got to keep at it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll say that I've been getting messages. It's interesting that I didn't realize there were influencer payment systems or platforms. There were a few mentioned in the report, and I've been getting outreach from a few others that, kind of are working on the same team, and they're working to combat this and do their part. So, all hands on deck for this big industry challenge. I'm hopeful too. I'm going to take a note from Hannah and also stay optimistic. But in the meantime, really, thank you so much, all of you, for your work on this. And thank you for contributing, Hannah. And until next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.